Welcome to the Social Change Diaries, the show that looks behind the curtain at everything you want to know about the social justice and nonprofit landscape. I'm your host, Vanessa Wakeman. Have you ever met someone and thought, why don't we already know one another? That's exactly how I felt when I first met today's guest, Erica Payne, president of Patriotic Millionaires. Patriotic Millionaires is a high net worth group of business leaders and investors who are united in their concern about the destabilizing concentration of wealth and power in America. Erica is a gifted storyteller and influencer using her voice to fight economic injustice. She is also the founder of the Agenda Project and a member of the board of Mayday.us, an anti-corruption SuperPAC. Erica's also the author of The Practical Progressive, How to Build a 21st Century Political Movement, which Jonathan Alter of Newsweek calls a blueprint for progressive conspiracy to help save the country. In my conversation with Erica, we're going to talk about women, money, and power, some of the challenges she sees facing women, and the tightrope walk for her as she tries to balance getting the work done versus building a thought leadership platform.
So I'm so excited to be here with Erica Payne to talk about thought leadership and her role as a thought leader. Erica, thank you so much for joining.
Oh, sure. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Well, let's dive right in. So I know Patriotic Millionaires is focused on creating a more stable and prosperous and balanced nation. Tell me, why is this important for women in the country?
Well, I think it's one of these issues that's important for everybody. We're in a position in the country right now where we basically have a concentration of wealth and power that is as bad as it has been since the 1920s. And so a very small number of people control most of the political power and most of the money. And that's bad for everybody, men, women, children alike. And so the Patriotic Millionaires came together about 6.5 years ago as some of just the most egregious examples of the results of this concentration of money and power became so apparent. So we first came together when during the 2010 lame duck session of Congress, when it became clear that President Obama was contemplating extending the Bush tax cuts for incomes over $1 million. And we got a bunch of multimillionaires to sign a letter saying basically for the good of the country, raise our taxes. Now that was a really narrow policy issue, but over time, as we grew the number of people who were supportive of this idea of, at a bare minimum, not extending the Bush tax cuts for incomes over $1 million, we all got to know each other and started thinking about what are the biggest problems that we're facing as a country. And this concentration of wealth and power is just strangling our innovation, it's strangling our social mobility. It's really preventing people from being able to live the kind of fulfilling lives that they want to live. So our work centers on challenging that concentration of wealth and power. So Vanessa, we orient our work around 3 core values. The first is that regular people should have as much political power as millionaires. That seems, evident, but it's certainly not the case right now. Jimmy Carter said that this country is essentially an oligarchy. Number 2, we think if someone works full-time, they should be able to afford their basic needs, which we translate into a $15 federal minimum wage. And 3, we believe that whatever the tab is at the end of the year for running the country, millionaires and corporations should pick up more of it. And these are values that are supported by the bipartisan majority of Americans. It's supported by the majority of men, the majority of women. And those 3 core values center on these issues of money and power, which have gotten so out of whack in the country and which are leading to, it's creating a lack of stability in the nation. And so we just feel like we've got to restore some core basic values, and then we can move forward from there.
That's terrific, and all of those efforts are truly necessary and appreciated. I agree. Tell me, as a woman, where do you see your voice being used? Like, where do you think your voice is most needed, and what's the potential impact?
Well, I will tell you, I think that women are such an interesting bunch, and not to just overgeneralize, but I do think a lot of times my women friends and the women I know professionally, these are some of the gutsiest women probably, in the country. I mean, on a bell curve, they're probably on the gutsier side and the more confident side. I mean, certainly women in politics are not shrinking violets for the most part, but I do think my experience has been that they tend to not necessarily believe that what they have to say is that important. Now, I almost never encounter that from a white man. And so one of the things that we just don't, they will just go on about things, and women, I would really like to see women. One of the things that I hope that I can do as the founder of the Patriotic Millionaires, and is hopefully a political leader in some sense, to encourage women to really engage in issues of money and power. And so I know, obviously there are different areas of public policy that women are very active in and are seen as leaders in, areas around reproductive health and freedom, issues around child care and education. Some of those more what people think of as feminine issues. I mean, I tend to think those are those that we need as many men working on those issues as we need women working on issues of money and power. But the reason, I think it's critical now that women in the country address these basic issues of money and power. So one of my goals as a woman leader is to encourage women to look outside the scope of what has been considered traditionally women's issues and to look much broader at the structure of our society as a whole. So there's no reason that women shouldn't have an opinion about gerrymandering and voting rights, issues of power, and that they shouldn't have opinions about what the minimum wage is and how the economy is structured and what the tax structure should be, because all of those issues are issues that affect every single other piece of American life.
I couldn't agree more. And it's really interesting what you just said about power. When I talk about thought leadership and how women use their voices, or just thought leadership in general, I'm usually thinking about it from the perspective of how does someone inspire and encourage us to think and behave differently, building influence and, power. And I notice in the conversations with women, there's a lot of discomfort with the idea of power. And so we're trying to create a redefine what power can look like for a woman. It doesn't have to be a forceful thing, but sort of the ability to, make things happen, and sort of owning the power and owning your voice. And why do you think, Erica, that women tend to shy away from engaging in those conversations and trying to yield influence? Like you said, a white man has no problem taking center stage and addressing issues. What do you think is different for women?
I don't really know. I mean, there have been so many studies about, women in the classroom and how teachers engage with women. I just think it's one of these things that I do think we're coming out of it. I mean, I got an MBA at Wharton, which is a, pretty good school. And I mean, the women that I went to school with were much less shrinking violets than some of the Southern women that I grew up with. The women, as I said, in politics are certainly, these are powerful women and they exert their power. I just want to see that go across the board, not just in cities, but in rural towns. And I mean, sexism is still a problem in so many places. We see it every day. But the thing is, I don't think all is lost. I mean, I believe that we are in a place. The Women's March, going to the Women's March was one of the most inspiring days. I took my 2-year-old daughter and my husband, and we went with a group of friends. And I do think women are finding their power, and they've increasingly been finding their power over, as time goes by, and that's a wonderful thing to be a witness to. And so I think for us, the goal is just to continue to encourage that in women who work for us and women who engage with. We have a lot of young people work at our organization through the years, and I spend a lot of time working with both the women and the men to find productive ways to exert their voice and influence in the world.
Wonderful. And Erica, what role does economics play in how a woman uses her voice in the social justice? What's your perspective on, what you see, how, financial status plays into just what role a woman has to take or is, places where she may be silent?
Well, listen, just so much of this is about money. And it shouldn't be, and I don't mean money in let's all go buy a limo. I just mean money in the basic amount of money that someone needs to live and feel secure. So it's one of the reasons why I'm so profoundly obsessed with raising the minimum wage substantially. There are so many women who are working full-time who cannot afford their basic needs, much less the basic needs of their families. And we've got to get that minimum wage up to a place where a person can work 40 hours a week and at least be able to afford a place to live, some food to eat, and just some of their basic needs. Because it's only if we're able to do that that we will have the freedom and ability to be able to raise our children, to participate in our communities, to participate politically. So I actually get frustrated sometimes with women who are really high achievers themselves but have forgotten that there's a first rung on every ladder and that we have got to make sure that first rung of every ladder is available to everyone. And I think we've got to give people a sense of stability and we've got to reconnect dignity and work. The purchasing power of the minimum wage has diminished substantially over the last several years. The minimum wage in if we just tracked it to inflation from its peak in 1968, the minimum wage right now would be about $11 an hour. If we tracked it to inflation and productivity, it would be $22 an hour. And right now the federal minimum wage is $7.25 an hour, which means that someone can work full-time 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year, and bring home $15,000. That is not enough to sustain a human being, much less a family. And we've got a responsibility to each other to make sure that that first rung of the ladder gives some stability to the folks in this country so they can then set about to achieve the next rung and the rung after that. But if you're working at $7.25 an hour, $8 an hour, you don't have time or energy left to try to do those next pieces that can take you further. I think it's heartbreaking and absolutely fundamentally immoral.
Hey everyone, I hope you're enjoying this week's episode of the Social Change Diaries. I want to interrupt for just a moment to let you know about a contest we're doing to kick off the launch of our show. We're really excited about the launch of the Social Change Diaries. I've personally spent the last 14 years as the founder and CEO of the Wakeman Agency, a social change agency working to amplify the voices of mission-driven causes and the people that lead them. Our podcast is a platform to share our experiences and insights with a wider audience. In honor of the launch of the podcast, we're doing a contest. One winner will be gifted registration to our She Roars Masterclass, our online thought leadership training for women in nonprofits. For 8 weeks, you will spend time with me and other agents of change from the nonprofit community working to build your thought leadership. You can see details about She Roars at thoughtleadershipforwomen.com. I'm really excited about the contest and providing this opportunity to our lucky winner. Now here's how you can win. Just 3 simple steps. First, subscribe to our podcast in iTunes. Second, leave a review in iTunes letting us know what you think of the podcast. And 3, take a screenshot of the review and send it to us at podcast@thewakemanagency.com. The winner will be notified on November 15th and enrolled in the spring program. All right, let's get back to the show.
I think that it's so important that women, as we climb, we lift others up. And I think that having these dialogues and discussions and think tanks and, action around how we elevate women, not just their voices, but also just elevate them in their, economics and education, and opportunities is really what can be transformative in the world that we live in and for the future. One of the things that we are really focused on with She Roars is trying to create more female thought leaders. And so when we first started doing this work, I realized that the journey was very different for women and how they approach their expertise and their thinking and insights. And I also looked back at some of the movements of the past, and while women have always been involved in some way, oftentimes the roles are minimized or sort of not as much emphasis is placed on what women have done. And so I'm advocating for women really doing the work that we're doing and sort of participating in those areas of social justice that are important to them, but also thinking about how do they ensure that they're creating a path for themselves. I think sometimes in the nonprofit sector, what happens is because, you're working in service to others, there's this sort of falsehood around, you can't establish a presence or you can't really be strategic about how you're going to create a platform for yourself or what's the legacy. And so rather than it happening by design, oftentimes it just sort of happens organically, and sometimes it doesn't happen at all because people have just sort of been, head down working. And what we're really trying to do is establish some framework for women to think about, what exactly is the space that you want to occupy and what does that look like and what do you need to do and how do you manage your resistance?
It's so convoluted though, Vanessa, because the thing is, I don't care anything about being a thought leader. I just want to do the work that I want to do, and I want to affect the change in the world that I want to affect. But I do think, I think you're exactly right. That requires some level of, self-branding. There is an element of determining on a more conscious level your role and the perception of you and, one meaning the normal one. And I could not be less comfortable with doing that. And I just don't care anything about it. But I kind of recognize intellectually that that's something that I guess needs to happen in order for me to build the organizations that I run, to build our ability to affect positive change in the world. But it is not something that I certainly come by naturally.
Exactly. And I think that goes back to what you said earlier on about gender socialization. Like women are, as girls, we're socialized differently. Boys are expected to lead and we're expected to be nice and, go along with the group. And so in the work that we're doing, I'm finding women are having tremendous resistance to taking that step. And so like you said, you're very comfortable doing the work, but the idea of this other element of sort of putting your stake in the ground feels a little unnatural. And so I'm hoping that we can work towards a new set of behaviors and thinking about, what it takes to really make a difference in a way that also provides an example for other women as they're going through the ranks, particularly in the nonprofit or social change sector. 70%, I think it's 74% of the workforce is women. We definitely need to create a pipeline where they can take those leadership roles and really create new possibilities for what the world will look like. Like what should happen if we had the guidance of, the feminine expertise or the female expertise at some of these discussions and part of these conversations with the seat at the table. I just think that it changes the trajectory of where the world, policies and ideas and how things are shaped.
And also, but the thing is, Vanessa, I think we need to hit it from the other angle, too. I happen to be raising a girl, but if I were raising a son, I hope that I would encourage in him the kind of behaviors that I appreciate in both men and women, and those are qualities of, inclusion, qualities of listening, qualities of empathy. And so I think that part of this job is for women to learn to assert themselves, and part of the job is for men to learn to not assert themselves as much, or to allow other people to insert themselves, because we're leaving a lot of good ideas on the table when you just have and a conversation endlessly dominated by white men.
Yes, yes,
and by
yes,
men.
yes.
You know, when President Trump, not to go skirt into this too much, but, you know, when he bragged he'd never changed a diaper, I thought, well, first of all, that's pathetic. And second of all, that's not even interesting from a human point of view. My husband, this was one thing, my husband that I loved about him. So when I had our child, the first 2 weeks he had in his head, he was like, my wife is not going to change a diaper. I'm going to change every single diaper. He just jumped in to fatherhood because he kind of felt like I'd been carrying her for 9 months and had that intimacy of experience and you know, raising her and going through the pregnancy. And he wanted to get, you know, close to our child as quickly as possible. So he actually took the opposite tack, you know. And part of that's a generational thing. I mean, Donald Trump's 70 years old or whatever he is, and I love seeing these younger men and the millennial men understanding, I mean, what is more beautiful than being a part of a family and being a really intimate and an integral part of a family? That's a wonderful thing that men are able to experience now that certainly most people who are in Donald Trump's generation, they just had a different experience in parenting. And so I do have hope that some of this stuff is just going to sort itself out. It just seems to be taking quite a bit of time to get sorted.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
You know, but I mean, I'd love to see parental leave, you know. I mean, I think parents should be able to take off 6 weeks or 2 months when they have their child so the family can have an opportunity to bond as a family. And if we can take those building blocks of the country and make those building blocks stronger, I think over time we'll have stronger neighborhoods, stronger communities, and a stronger country.
Yes, yes, yes. I'm for it. Tell me where I sign up. I would like to be on that bandwagon. I ask all of my guests about vulnerability. I do believe in thought leadership that vulnerability is really important because you're sharing, when you're introducing new ideas, you're sharing a part of you, you know, your unique perspective and how you envision, you know, the possibilities for the world. Can you share with us where you see or where you find yourself being most vulnerable in your work?
Well, I mean, I'll just give you an example. Yesterday, through another organization I run, the Agenda Project, we released an ad in response to the Republican health care bill that was a takeoff on an ad that we had done several years ago. But in essence, it equates the Republican health care bill with throwing a grandmother in a wheelchair off a cliff. Now, the ad itself, I don't think it's violent, but I mean, it has a dark kind of presence to it, and it's, you know, it's trying to really grab people's attention and say, let's really focus on what we're doing here because this is going to hurt a lot of people. You know, they're planning to cut almost $1 trillion from Medicaid. Well, 2/3 of people in nursing homes, which are on Medicaid, because this is largely middle-class families who ran through all of their money paying for the nursing home, and now they're out of money. So Medicaid is picking that up. 50% of births in the country are covered by Medicaid. And Stuart Varney, who is a Fox News host, just went to town on me 2 or 3 different times in the last couple of days. Oh, Erica Payne this and Erica Payne that. And I looked at that, and number one, a lot of the stuff that he was saying was a lie anyway. But I do wonder, you know, when you've got the Alex Joneses of the world, that crazy right-wing guy who led to Pizzagate, I do worry sometimes that in being really vocal and challenging people with a lot of power and a lot of money, that you can put yourself in a vulnerable place and put your family at risk. It's, you know, these are not intellectual arguments that people are having, and they're not reasoned arguments that people are having right now. People are really emotional. There's a tremendous amount of violence in the political discourse, and I do worry sometimes about that. When you put yourself out, you make yourself vulnerable, and we've seen that throughout social justice movements in the past. I mean, you challenge structures of power and money, and you put yourself at risk, and you put your family at risk.
And how do you personally manage that? Like when you hear people, you know, stating, false truths about you and presenting incorrect portrayals of your work and what you're trying to do, or people on social media possibly saying negative things. Like, how do you manage that? Because
and not even just negative things, Vanessa, like crazy cuckoo bird silent things. Erica, I wanted, blah, 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 something horrible and ugly. I mean, how do I handle it? I basically ignore it, and I just try to stay very focused on the idea that I am trying to speak for people who don't have as much as a voice as I am privileged to have. I mean, a woman or a man making $8 an hour has less money and power than I have. I believe I have a moral obligation to speak for people with less power and money than I have. And so I just try to stay focused on the fact that I truly fundamentally believe that I am at least attempting to be a force for good in the world. And if I can feel within my own moral construct that I am doing things that are intended to help people who are less fortunate than me, that are intended to bring some more equality, some more fairness, and some more decency to the world, I just have to stand by that and hope that the rest of it works out.
Yes, thank you. All right, well, we're about to end, but before I let you go, I want to talk about She Roars. So we consider a woman who roars, a woman who's unapologetic in her, approach and her desire to create change, someone who is challenging the status quo, someone who's using her voice to uplift communities or to, create a just society. And for us, you are absolutely a woman who roars. Would you like to share with us how you believe you roar?
Oh my God! I don't know if I roar. I hope I do. I think there are a lot of people out there who need somebody roaring for them. So I just, wake up every day and work with our team to try to put these ideas out there, that there are some basic things that we all agree on, and those need to serve as the basis for our public policy. I mean, the country was built on the concept of political equality, and we have one party now that does everything it can to prevent political equality. So let's just address some of these basic things that we're at least all supposed to agree on, and if I can bring a voice to that, then all the better. You're sweet to say I roar. That's nice. That started off my day great. Thank you.
My pleasure. It has been an absolute delight to speak with Erica today. Erica, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us and educating us about some of the work that you're doing and how you manage it, how you are helping to uplift the voices of women, but also just underserved and marginalized, and to create opportunities. I think that it's so important to have people on the front lines, who have resources that can help to progress the agenda, and I'm just so appreciative of all that you're doing.
Oh, thank you so much. This was great, Vanessa. Thank you.
Erica made a lot of points in our conversation about the need for economic security, and of course I can't agree more. What I thought was also very interesting and also a great validation of what I'm hearing from others is Erica is more focused on doing the work and affecting change than she is on building a platform. And so I was very happy to hear her say that while her interest is, head down, plowing through the work, she also understands the value and the need for developing a thought leadership platform. And I think that is so critical. And a point I just want to end with is it is not enough to just do the work. This needs to be strategic. There needs to be a vision and a plan around how you are going to move your vision forward. How are you going to create change? And I know for a lot of women that there are challenges with this and there's hesitation, but if we look at any of the models that are successful, the majority of them do have a strategic component to it. And so I end this segment, asking you to think about what can your thought leadership platform look like and what are you willing to do to go from just doing the work to creating a platform for yourself to create the change that you want to see.